Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to another episode of the Think Clinical Podcast. For my Diaspora physicians coming back home, as I promised in the first episode of this series, we will be talking about what opportunities and landmines you need to pay attention to when you're coming home in our fourth episode, and here we are. It's always great to be here. Please remember to subscribe, like, and share. And I want to tell you a story about a physician that I know. So she's Ghanaian trained, Ghanaian born. She did her training at the University of Ghana Medical School, completed her residency in the UK, spent 8 years building an impressive specialty practice in London, and she's board certified, published, respected in her field. Now she comes back home, not just for a visit, but she's home to stay, to lead, and to build something for the continent that trained her and shaped her. 6 months after her return, she called me and said something I have been thinking about ever since. She said, Hamza, nobody tells you that coming home is harder than leaving. Leaving was easy. Leaving, everyone celebrated. Coming home, nobody knows what to do with you. This is very important. And that sentence, coming home, nobody knows what to do with you, is what this episode is all about. Because the diaspora return conversation in Africa healthcare is often told as a triumph narrative. The prodigal physician returns, the continent rejoices, expertise flows back home. The reality is more complicated, more textured, and in some ways, more interesting than that. So please remember to subscribe, like, and share as we jump into this. So let's look at this. The opportunity is real, just so you know. And let me start with the optimistic case scenario, because it's true and it matters. Africa is experiencing the largest wave of private healthcare investments in its history. Whether you see it or not, it's happening. Development, finance institutions, private equity, sovereignty wealth funds, impact investors, they are all looking at African healthcare and seeing the same thing: a massive underserved market, a growing middle class with rising health insurance adoption, and a significant gap between existing health infrastructure and population health records. That combination, capital flowing in, healthcare infrastructure needing to be built and managed, creates a specific demand. A demand for people who understand both worlds, who can speak the language of international finance and clinical governance, who can walk into a London boardroom and credibly explain what a hospital group in Accra needs operationally, and then walk into that Accra hospital and credibly lead a clinical team. This is the diaspora physician unique position, and you are in that translation layer, and right now that translation layer is in desperately short supply. So if we look at this from a research standpoint, 2024 report by the American Private Equity and Venture Capital Association identified healthcare as the second largest sector by deal value in Africa private sector, with over 2.3 billion deployed in 2023. The report specifically cited a shortage of operationally experienced clinical leadership as a key constraint on deal execution and portfolio performance. So looking at this, you can clearly see the gap up there. And beyond investment-driven opportunities, there is an academic and system strengthening pipeline. So African medical schools are actively recruiting diaspora physicians to serve as faculty, program directors, or clinical department heads. Positions that in the US or UK system would require 20 years of institutional climbing can be available to a credentialed diaspora physician in Africa within the first years of return. And then there is the entrepreneurial opportunity. African healthcare is, in many markets, still organized around small, independent, founder-operated facilities. And the diaspora physician with management training, capital access, and operational expertise is positioned to build something. So the opportunity is real, and I want to be unambiguous about that. What I also want to be unambiguous about are the landmines, because I have seen too many brilliant physicians land in Africa with genuine passion like my friend and leave 2 years later. In my friend's case, 6 months, she had seen the light, burned out and disillusioned. Not because they were wrong about the opportunity, but because nobody prepared them for what was between them and that opportunity. Now, this is the most important part. Let's talk about landmines. Landmine number 1, credential recognition and re-licensure. And this one catches diaspora physicians off guard more than almost everything else. Your medical degree from Ghana, your residence from UK, your board certification from the United States, none of these automatically grant you the right to practice medicine at home. The Medical and Dental Council of Ghana, the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria, the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Council, every country has its own re-licensure process, and they vary in complexity, timeline, and cost. I know physicians who assumed that coming home meant coming home, that their credentials will be the self-evidently recognized. Some of them even waited 18 months for a license because that time they could not practice clinically. Some ran out of financial runway. Some went back to the diaspora. So the lesson here is that start the re-licensure process at a minimum of 6 months before your intended return date. That's the first thing that you need to do. Landmine number 2, the salary reality. And this conversation that causes most distress, and I want to handle it honestly and compassionately. A physician earns $200,000 to $400,000 in the United States, or $100,000 to £200,000 in the United Kingdom. Cannot expect an equivalent compensation in Ghana, or Nigeria, or Kenya, full stop. The economics of African healthcare, particularly for clinical roles, do not support those salary levels in most contexts. What this means practically is that physicians planning for return must happen years, not months, before their departure. Eliminating US or UK based debt, building savings that can sustain the transition period, identifying income sources that are not purely dependent on local clinical salary, consulting, telemedicine, speaking, advisory roles, equity in ventures. The diaspora physicians who navigate return most successfully have diversified income architecture. They are not dependent on a single clinical salary at the market rates. So in 2023, a survey by the Medical Education Partnership Initiative found that the average specialist physician salary in sub-Saharan Africa ranges from 25,000 to 65,000 USD equivalent annually, compared to a US specialist average of 350 to 450,000. The gap is not a surprise to most diaspora physicians, but its fully practical implications frequently are. Landmine number 3, the organization culture gap. This is the most emotionally complex landmine, and one that my colleague in London described. So most African organization cultures in healthcare and beyond are often deeply hierarchical and relationship driven, consensus oriented. Decision making moves at a pace that can feel agonizing to someone trained in an execution speed culture like the US or the UK healthcare system organizations. Accountability structures that diaspora physicians take for granted, clear reporting lines, documented performance expectations, transparent promotion criteria may simply not exist in organizations that they are joining. So this is another very important landmine that we need to pay attention to. Landmine number 4, the support system gap. Because most diaspora physicians underestimate how much of their identity and emotional stability was built around their diaspora community. The Nigerian Physician Association in Houston, the Ghanaian Church in London, their professional network, their social rhythms, the friendships built over years in a particular city. Coming home means, paradoxically, sometimes feeling more isolated because you have left your community and the community you are returning to has evolved without you. So you have to pay attention to this. So how do you come back then? How do you come back the right way? And this is where the conversation should start. 1, return with a role, not a mission. Passion is not a job description. I want to come back and help. It's not a career plan. And that's what I hear most of our colleagues going back down to say. The diaspora physician who strives upon return have a specific role, a CEO position, a department head lead, a funded entrepreneurial venture, a structured consulting arrangement that provides both financial sustainability and organizational legitimacy from day one. Step 2, you spend your first 90 days listening, not leading. You listen. Because even if you are arriving in a leadership role, especially if you are, invest your first 3 months in understanding the existing context before you start changing it. What has already been tried? What failed and why? Who are the informal power brokers? Who are the sacred cows? What does the staff think the organization's biggest problem is? You may be surprised to discover what this is. Then you move to stage 3, which is build your income architecture before you land. You have to. And I said this earlier, but it bears repeating. Consulting relationships that can be maintained remotely. Medical advisory board rules, telemedicine income from diaspora-facing platforms, speaking engagements, book royalties, whatever it takes to ensure that your financial survival is not contingent solely on your local salary during the transition period is the most important. The fourth thing is find your people. There is a growing community of returned diaspora and healthcare professionals across African cities, Accra, Nairobi, Kenya, Johannesburg, Kigali. They are building WhatsApp groups, LinkedIn communities, professional associations. Try to join some of those because some of the pain that you may be going through, they can help you navigate that. Step 5 is that give it 3 years before you judge. The worst career decisions I've seen diaspora physicians make happen at 18-month mark. 18 months in, the novelty has worn off. The challenges are real and persistent, and the compensation gap is felt daily. The organizational friction is exhausting, and the diaspora city, with its efficient systems and familiar comforts, starts to look very attractive. Give it time to be able to play through. So coming home is not easy. This is the conclusion of it, and it's not the triumphant narrative that gets told at the diaspora conferences. It is hard, it is complex, and sometimes lonely, sometimes bureaucratically infuriating, and sometimes the most rewarding professional decision a physician can make is going back home. The opportunity, however, is real, and we all know Africa needs you, not as a savior, not as an expert, but as a colleague, a builder, someone who has seen the possible and is willing to invest in making it possible here. The landmines are real too. Prepare for them honestly, and they become surmountable obstacles rather than career-ending surprises. This has been another episode. Thank you so much. And to end with this quote, coming home, nobody knows what to do with you. It's very important. This is one of the most important things that I want you, and it does answer the sentence, you have to know what to do with yourself. Come with a plan, come with humility, come ready to build, and come ready to stay long enough for the building to mean something. I will see you in our next episode. Thank you so much. Do have a great day.
Every day gets mapped out, every move got purpose. Cold room, warm heart, I keep my head steady. Bills don't run my life,